Alright guys, so in today's video I wanted to go through basically catching you up with where we are on the first video that I filmed. Unfortunately, I didn't really do a good job filming a lot of the build at the beginning just because we were doing a lot of other things, and but I took a lot of pictures and my dad took a lot of pictures, so I'm hoping we can have a little slideshow and catch everybody up. So the first challenge of doing a LS4 with the 4T80E is you need to find a place to put the starter. So something that Brandon Furchess at LS4 King he pioneered was mounting the starter to the oil pan. Now he has a whole oil pan that you can buy that has the starter provision and everything already all figured out for you. We chose to go the custom route because frankly the pan didn't even exist at that time. So here's the start of that. First you gotta make some relief cuts here to even get the starter to fit in there. You can, on the stock pan, you can actually see a relief where GM, it almost looks like GM was experimenting with that. But yeah, so there's our initial cut, and then you need to weld a boss onto it so that you can drill and tap it to put your starter. Here it is starting to go together. And then what Brandon does is he actually grinds down the side of the transmission at the pan rail. And I'm not actually a big fan of that just because that's part of your sealing surface. So we chose to notch the pan in this area instead of grinding away part of the flange. Here's more of the welds on the part that we machined. And then another thing that Brandon doesn't do is he basically, you lose volume when you make this pocket for your starter. What we chose to do was add the volume back in by extending the sump. So you can see my welds actually came out pretty decent for a oily metal that was completely saturated. It came out pretty decent, so yeah, I was pretty happy with how that all came out. So yeah, you can see the clearances for the starter are pretty tight. That's what you want. And we also had to modify the pickup. Well, you didn't have to, but we chose to modify the pickup just to try and get it more centered in the sump to avoid oil starvation. So there it is, all done. We're actually going to have to notch it here to get around the K member of the Cadillac. So the next step, we took the Cadillac K member, we cut the frame horns off of it, and basically this is a process of roll it underneath the car, see if it fits, cut more, roll it underneath the car, see what else is hitting, and you do that a bunch of times until and you keep cutting and keep cutting and keep cutting. And did I mention cutting? We had to do a lot of cutting until finally it rolls underneath the car and you can set it down on top of it. So we had it on these casters that made it really easy. Starting to look at the turbo, we were originally thinking maybe of putting it up high like this, but we actually changed our mind on that, and then you can see we're starting to plate it back off, and just more cutting. We actually had to cut a relief in here for the damper, and eventually you get it to the point where it fits. So I was pretty happy at this point. So the next thing I started working on was the Cadillac has a 5x115 millimeter, which is very close to a 5 on 4.5, but not close enough. You will have issues if you try to run 5 on 4.5 wheels. So I worked on re-drilling the hubs for a 5 on 4 3/4 traditional Chevy bolt pattern. There it is, all done. Just 1/2-inch fine thread studs, and then I made these little plates just to mock everything up. And there's the first look of the car with a wheel on it. We were definitely getting jazzed at this point. And then we found that the strut was a little tall and you couldn't get the car very low, so we actually went to a 3rd gen Camaro strut. We found that they have the same spacing for the strut, for where the spindle attaches to the strut, and we actually modified this area so that we could lean the strut in a little bit in order to match up to the stock shock towers. And we've also found that puts our turning radius of the spindle about perfect to where you need it to manage your torque steer. But I also made this shock collar registers into the strut with this little thing here, and then I bored this out. It's actually from a sprint car. I had to bore it out just a little bit, just to get it to slip over top of the 3rd gen Camaro strut. So there it is all together, using a Torrington bearing at the top. And then you can see up here is a BMW caster camber plate, and then we made these little flanges, raised it up just a little bit to try and get a little bit of extra shock travel. And there it is all assembled, and there it is in the car. So while I was doing this, my dad was working on the exhaust. So we finally had found where we wanted to put the turbo, and it was down low in the front. Turbo is a significant amount of weight, and you want to get things as low as possible in the front wheel drive configuration. Also, you can see there's a motor mount here. We fabricated that. There's the turbo, straight off the tractor trailer. It's a Borg-Warner S475. And then you can see we got one of our pipes here. So this kind of located the turbo, and then we could start working on the rest of the exhaust. So you can see Dad bored a hole in the side of the frame and lined it up with the outside, and then reinforced it all back in. So there it is all done, spitting out the side. Then we picked up this intercooler. It's a Hellion turbo kit for I believe an SN95 Mustang, and we picked this guy up. The guy was making 800 horsepower with it. All this tubing came with it, blow off valve, $125, kind of hard to beat. Of course we had to modify that because it had 2.5-inch in and out, that or 2-inch, I can't remember. But we wanted to do 3 just for the extra volume. Bought these cast elbows to work with the intercooler, and used chunks. We never throw anything away, so used chunks from old intercoolers that we have cut up and modified in the past. So that's where all that came from. And changed a lot of the ports around to make it a cross flow. Then I was working on a coolant plate, a reservoir or a manifold. Drew it up on a piece of aluminum, this is actually the other side. We actually bought this side at a flea market. The guy didn't know what he had. He had a whole pile of just billet random flanges and stuff, and I saw this sitting here, and I'm like, I know what that's for, and walked up to him, and how much? You know, $2. So yeah, kind of hard to beat that, but there was only one side. Unfortunately, we looked for the other, and it wasn't there, but it kind of works out for this project because we probably couldn't have used the other side on this one. This is the one that I fabricated. Another nice weld. Yeah, you know, you gotta get those pictures for the Instagram. Yeah, I was pretty happy with how that came out. So Dad started to modify the front frame area. We wanted to get the radiator in here as far as possible, and he also cut the lower core support out and replaced it with a tube. You can see that there. And then reinforced it all back in. Then we took the radiator and relocated. It just used these 3/4 MPT bungs. I think they were 3/4, whatever they were. We relocated to a barb fitting just because that's easier and cheaper to get stuff for. More nice welds. Yeah, you know, I'm getting decent at the aluminum. And then that goes there, and then there will be an electric water pump in this area. So there that is, and then here was my water manifold. I attached the thermostat, well, not thermostat, the reservoir here, attach that all to it, and then there's this tube. This will go to the other side at the top, and then you can see this tapped area. This will go down to the water pump. So there it is, all laid out, and then made another mount for the radiator, and then we started working on tubing, mounted up the intercooler, started working on tubing to get the air from the intercooler to the throttle body. At this point we had decided to go with the LS1 intake. There it is, looking pretty fancy. There's the tube. And then I started working on the wastegate. Now the wastegate, unfortunately, it's a Chinese wastegate. It didn't come with the right seat, so I had to take a washer and weld it to the bottom. I bored it out on the lathe here, and then I welded it to the bottom, just so I could get it to the right height, and came out good. Now it all bolts up nice, and started welding the tube to the other side. So there all that is. And then, oh, this is a really cool thing. I 3D printed this pie cut template. I was pretty proud of this. We were trying to lay it out on a piece of paper, the template, just to lay it over the tube, and it's like, this doesn't make sense. And then I had an idea and ran inside and drew it up on the computer and had it print in less than a couple minutes, and 3D printed this. There it is, starting to go together. So that way you don't have to spend money on a 5-inch bend, which are expensive, and you can just use a straight piece that you can get anywhere. So there it is, starting to come out. That's to get air to the turbo. You don't want to be sucking hot air right off the turbo or right off the radiator. There it is, you can see more welds, and then we ovaled out the bottom just to give more clearance for the turbo drain and that kind of thing. Oh, there's the water pump. So this side goes to the back side, this goes to the front side, and oh, I guess that's it. So yeah, this basically catches you up to where we are when I started filming. So I'm gonna cut this one off here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you like this kind of content, I'd obviously like to show more fabrication in future episodes. So, alright, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.